it really started out with Urban Shet 2 years ago, or I guess 3 years ago almost, when he moved to India with his family to work with the Bain office in Mumbai, met with us, saw our work, and felt at a personal level that there was something he can do in terms of using the Bain expertise to really talk about philanthropy in an analytical manner. And I still remember the first IPF forum that we had, and Urban had come, and to be honest with you guys, very few people from Bain were even here at that event, and I don't think Urban or we could have ever thought the amount of coverage that this State of Philanthropy report has, not only in India, but globally. Last year, I think this report was covered over 100 times in various publications around the world, and this is really now the thought piece in terms of philanthropy, not only for India, but I think other countries are actually quoting this report as a need in their own countries to start thinking about philanthropy and measuring it in the same manner that Bain does. 3 years down the line, all of you have the reports in front of you. We have numerous reporters in the room today, and it's really become a focal point of the Indian Philanthropy Forum and really a focal point of our partnership with Bain and Company. In addition to them publishing this report and taking out the time and sweat equity to put this in place, they've also provided support to nonprofit organizations in our Dasra social impact program, helping mentoring them, again using Bain and Company's core competencies and really creating shared value amongst their firm and the organizations and the activities that Dasra supports. Urban has made it very clear, and I think this is a good thing, because many times with reporters in the room, this part of the presentation may hijack the entire IPF. And because of that, Urban has made it really clear that he'll give his speech. Kamil is in the room. Kamil, if you could just stand up, he's in the back of the room, and wave. Kamil is the reason why this is covered in every single publication. And in fact, if you see the Mint today, there's a 2-page article about this exact report that's being launched. And Kamil has really been instrumental in bringing the philanthropic conversation to the landscape beyond Urban, Bain, and even Dasra, but really taking it to mainstream media. So thank you, Kamil, for that. And Kamil is going to be here post the discussion to answer anyone's questions, and we'll meet reporters outside and take you guys to another setting where you can have a much longer conversation. And finally, the reports are with you. I think on the slides you may not be able to read some of the text, so please look at the reports as Urban discusses this report, and hopefully we can have this again and again, year after year. With that, I'll introduce Urban.
Listen, thank you for having me. First, let me just thank Neville and Nira for slotting me in right after this beautiful heavy lunch at the Dodge, so I have the challenge of not putting everybody to sleep in the next 20 minutes. Secondly, I'd actually like to thank all of you for coming to the Dasra India Philanthropy Forum. I think it's incredibly important, and I think it's a testament to sort of the dedication that you have put into philanthropy in India. And the importance you give to the work that Dasra does, and it's something I believe highly in. And as David was saying, 3 years ago, we put together the India Philanthropy Report, but then over that time, my engagement with Dasra has become much more personal for my wife and I, where we've become part of the Giving Circle ourselves as well, the third Giving Circle of Sneha. So I think the work is incredibly important. What I'll try to set out to do today, and also, by the way, like David said, the reports are on your tables. I'll go through these charts, but unless you're Superman, they're going to be impossible to read sitting out in the audience. What I'll set out to do today is to provide some insights from interviews we've done with 400 high net worth individuals and emerging high net worth individuals in India across a few cities. We did this same exercise last year, and it enables us to just sort of think about and communicate the landscape of philanthropy in India. And since we've done it last year, we can compare it to where we were effectively a year ago. And also we can compare it to the US as well, is because we're using part of a set of questions that the Center for Philanthropic Giving at Indiana University also uses to track philanthropic giving in the United States as well. And just to set context, we interviewed about 400 emerging high net worth individuals and high net worth individuals in India. And I think what's notable about this as we go through this, and it has actually some profound implications, for giving in India and for fostering giving in India is, about 80% of the people we spoke to would classify themselves as novice givers, meaning they've been giving for less than 3 years, versus 15% or so would classify themselves experienced and 5% as expert. Another sort of notable thing that we'll go through and I'll talk about is that about 30% of the individuals we spoke to were less than 30 years old, sort of the next generation of givers, so to speak, and spread geographically, not only in Mumbai and Delhi, but also Hyderabad and Pune, to bring a little bit of diversity, geographic diversity, into the mix. As we think about the evolution of giving in India, the first thing I'll point to is that the amount donated actually has increased from 2010 to 2011. So in 2010, on average, high net worth individuals indicated they gave about 2.3% of their income to philanthropy, versus this past year, they indicated 3.1%. So it's heartening to see sort of this increase in giving as reported by high net worth individuals. And I'll come back to this later. The same set of people are saying, look, I intend to give more next year. There's some differences in terms of who will give more. But this trend should go up. And obviously, the U.S. is sort of the world benchmark for philanthropic giving for a number of reasons. And there's room to go yet for us to get to that level. But in and of itself, the trend is very heartening in India. Now, the next thing I'll talk about, I actually found to be one of the most interesting things, because it does have profound implications for Dasra and groups out there cultivating philanthropists, which is how high net worth individuals will classify themselves in terms of their experience with giving. And what this chart shows is, for the red color effectively, is how those high net worths in India would classify themselves as novice givers, less than 3 years experience, intermediate givers, experienced givers, 3 to 5 years, and expert givers, greater than 5 years. And India, close to 80% of the high net worth individuals would say, I'm a novice giver, versus in the US, about 80%, 75% are in the intermediate category. When you couple this with the fact that India has, at last count, the world's highest growth rate for HNIs, right? So we're going to be creating more high net worth individuals in India. We have been creating them at substantial scale and rate the last few years. These people are entering the philanthropic ecosystem, consider themselves to be novices to giving. So how you build trust in these individuals, how you get them acquainted with the philanthropic ecosystem, how do you build confidence in their giving will be incredibly important. And cultivating them to grow philanthropy will be incredibly important. And that the role that organizations like Dasra or Give India or the foundations that many of you represent give will become even more important for individuals like this, because they will want trusted channels to give through, channels that vet donor organizations, channels that know how to work with donor organizations to create impact. This next chart, which is, I think, figure 4 in your philanthropy reports, this was a little interesting for me. So on my right-hand side is how people prefer to give in the U.S. and giving vehicles, which are foundations, charitable trusts, are the most prevalent form of giving in the U.S. And what surprised me a little bit is that in India, among this high net worth individual, that was also stated to be the preferred route for giving in India as well, which is organizations like Dasra or Give India or other foundations that can do the vetting, that can sort of engender trust and confidence in giving. So these types of intermediaries will play a more important role in India giving going forward. If I just turn the page and chapter a little bit to talk about the next generation of givers, one of the things that we found this year is wealthy young Indians are particularly interested in increasing their philanthropic giving and their philanthropic involvement going forward. You know, these young individuals, many of them are coming from from families that have their own business organizations. They're coming from families that are first or second generation entrepreneurs. But it's clear from the conversations we've had and the surveys we've done that the next generation, the young, will play a pretty fundamental role in evolving philanthropy in India. And among the young in India, they have a very influential role in their family's charitable giving activities, particularly when you compare it to the United States. When asked various questions around the involvement of their children or younger relatives in selecting philanthropies or charities to participate, in defining the family's mission for its corporate social responsibility or its family giving, what we found is that nearly 70% to 75% of high net worth individuals would say, look, my children or my younger relatives, whether nieces, nephews, actually have a very strong voice and a leading voice in how my family thinks about giving, where we give, and how we give. Which is very much unlike the US, and the stark difference actually did surprise me quite a bit. And I think much of this ties back to our culture and how we're family oriented, how decision making incorporates family views. I think some of it also ties back to the fact that 80% of the givers in India are novice givers, are seeking information, are seeking the voices of others. So I think one of the things to think about for us in this room, both for givers and also those who are fostering the philanthropic ecosystem, is how do we engage people at a younger age? How do we engage younger would-be philanthropists who have such a large voice in how their families contribute or think about contributing? Not surprisingly, those 30% of high net worth individuals who are under 30, give less than their older counterparts do. So on average, the older high net worth individual is giving about 4% to philanthropic organizations versus around 2% for the younger. So there's nothing too surprising. It's presumably the older you get, the more assets you accumulate, your income grows, you'll give more. But what's also interesting to me is younger donors are indicating more than older donors that they will give more in coming years as well. And so over the coming year in 2012, nearly 70% of younger HNIs, those under 30, said, I will increase my giving in 2012, versus about 50% of those older than 30. And one of the interesting sort of threads that we began to pick up in some of our conversations is that the younger donors, more than the older donors, are more interested in impact philanthropy, venture philanthropy, however you want to characterize it, meaning not only do I want to give the money, but I want to be involved in the capability building. I want to be able to measure the outcomes of my donations. I potentially want to make multi-year commitments. And so I'm there for the long haul to make a difference in the outcomes of the organizations that I work with. So, this chart effective on the left-hand side just communicates for in the next 12 months, 60% of younger givers will increase their giving versus 50% of olders will increase their. I think the great message in all of this is, look, a predominant number of givers will increase their giving in the coming years. And over a longer period, over a 5-year period, which is the right-hand side, nearly 70% of donors and HNIs are saying, over the next 5 years, I will continue to increase my quantum of giving, which I think says wonderful things about the potential for philanthropy in India. And when we turn the question and ask, where do you want your philanthropic dollars targeted towards among this group, there was no surprise in that, education was in 2011 and is in 2012 the primary target for giving. That's where people want to give. What surprised us a little bit is the jump in food and clothing from 11 to 12. That's a sector in which we know that NGOs and philanthropic giving can have tremendous impact. I'll talk about one, which is Akshay Patra, a little bit later. But education remains the number one priority for HNIs. And education is something that's obviously a focus of this India Philanthropy Forum, with a focus on educating adolescent girls, vocational education. And education continues to be, in India, a leading source of where charitable and philanthropic giving goes. Our point of departure for education in India for children, particularly those children in poverty, is bleak. 20% of poor children, have no access to education whatsoever. 45% drop out before the age of 8. So educational outcomes, are abysmal, and that's something that absolutely needs to be improved. And many of you are focusing and working on that. And as we know, and as Manish spoke about earlier, fixing this sort of achievement gap in India can have a profound impact on the trajectory of this country. So we will either grow faster or grow slower if we don't close that gap. And it said if we can reduce poverty by 70, a more employable workforce can reduce poverty substantially in India and take per capita GDP up by more than 2x. So there's an absolute crying and burning platform to address education in India. And one thing I'll just highlight quickly, because I'm just amazed by the impact that different philanthropies and NGOs. The Azim Premji Foundation, which I know most of you are familiar with, has a target of building 1,300 schools in the next few years, 2 in every district in India. In the last year, they provided computer-assisted learning kits to 20,000 schools. Akshay Patra, which is an incredibly innovative NGO based out of Bangalore, is feeding 1.2 million children a day. 1.2 million children a day. They have brought an amazingly innovative business model and just operating model to feed 1.2 million children a day. They are eradicating in those schools where they participate malnourishment and therefore increasing attendance. So it's amazing what they're doing. You heard about Educate Girls and the fantastic outcomes they're driving. And then, the focus of last year's Dasra Giving Circle in Mutangan is doing an amazing job in the BMC schools here. Right now I think they're close to 2,000 children are educated in the schools that they manage. And so the outcomes you can drive, that we can drive in philanthropy and education are phenomenal. And that is a source of the interest and focus for high net worth individuals in India. And so engaging them on this could be pretty powerful. If I then just turn to sort of think about the future, and what are donors, what are high net worth individuals saying about their giving going forward? What they're saying is, look, I will increase my giving. I absolutely will increase my giving. What these high net worth individuals said about their giving in this year in 2012 is half of them said, look, I will increase my giving. I will definitely most likely increase it. And of those, 40% indicated I'll increase it by 10% or more. And 20% in the balance, 60% so I'll increase it modestly. And when you combine this with the fact there's more H&I is being formed, there's greater interest in this, they intend to give more, this group can play a tremendous role in sort of greasing the skids, so to speak, for greater giving and greater confidence in giving. What I think is even more interesting is when we talked about the medium range, the next 5 years in terms of giving, 66% of the individuals said they will increase giving over the next 5 years, which is almost a 50% jump over last year. And more than a third of those who said I'll increase it by more than 20% in the next 5 years. And so this chart just compares 2011 responses to 2012. In 2011, 52% said I will increase my giving in the next 5 years. In 2012, something like 70% are saying I will increase my giving in the next 5 years. So there's something that's happened, right? Either philanthropy has gotten a greater voice, a share of voice into conversation and dialogue in the country. There's a little bit more confidence in the system that and there's a little bit more confidence in understanding that if I give, I can